Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tallman, and with me today is my business partner, Scott Hallberg. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Hello, it's good to be back.
Yeah, so how's your year going so far?
Yeah, it's been cold.
Yeah.
It's been brutal. We've had a hard January, but it's hard to believe it's a new year. But overall, I'm optimistic and looking forward to hopefully a good year if it warms up.
I think you and I should do another podcast about managing homes in extreme conditions, or just, be a landlord managing extreme conditions, because the last week was just absolutely horrendous, just dumped on with snow and sub-zero temperatures. And, people say, well, property managers, they just collect rent. Well, it'd be interesting if they came and jumped in our shoes last week, like people are maybe thinking about doing it themselves, and live that week, because not every week's like that, but it was certainly stressful with all the heat calls and frozen pipes and things like that. So
yeah, it was a double whammy: snow over the weekend and then extreme cold all week. And yeah, we had to dust off the manuals for that week. It was brutal.
It was. So Scott, I brought you on here today, not to talk about the weather, but to discuss a trend that we're experiencing a little bit these days, and that's converting a personal residence into a rental home. This isn't new to us. We know all about this, but during the housing crisis, let's say maybe 2008 to 2012, call it, I don't know, maybe it bled over into different areas there, but we experienced this. And those clients back then were mostly, I can't sell it. I can't sell my house and I need you to rent it. So we were like the last ditch effort before they, in some cases, probably went into foreclosure. But today we're hearing something different. And that is, I think I might want to rent my house because, and I think this is in most cases, I don't want to lose my interest rate. And that's something that Jake hears. Whenever we hear someone that has a personal residence, we ask them their why, or what they're thinking about. It's, well, I'm at 3.5%, or I'm at 2.75 even, and they don't want to lose that. So for today's episode, I want to discuss the key decision points that we think really need to be addressed before deciding to convert that personal residence into a rental home. And just a heads up for everybody, this is going to be the first in a 3-part series. Today is all about making that decision. In the next episode, I plan to bring on a lender and a mortgage person to dig in and talk about really what's needed on that front. And then finally, you and Scott will join forces again for episode 3 to discuss the idea of hiring a property manager makes sense for your personal residence, or just self-managing, and see if that's maybe a better option for people. So Scott, let's start with the first, what I think is maybe the most important question. I guess that's up for debate, but that I think people should ask themselves before getting into this is that, am I really, and stress really, ready to be a landlord? And what in your mind goes into making that decision?
Yeah, there's a lot to consider here, but the main point in my mind is, are you able to make that mindset switch and letting go of your personal connection to your home and developing it into a business and letting other people live in it? Some people have that sense of territory. They don't want anyone to invade that space. And so really it's about letting go. And aside from all the financial aspects of, am I prepared? Is it really the right situation or not? But really there's just that psychological trigger that needs to happen, that it's not your personal home anymore. If you do this activity, it becomes a tool and an asset that hopefully, builds wealth for you, but it's not your personal home anymore at that point. It turns into a business.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done, right? I think you're right. It isn't their home. And if you're watching on YouTube, air quotes home, it's a product. It really is at that point. It becomes a product that you're trying to rent and to really enter a small business with. That's what's happening, is you're entering into a small business when you decide to become a landlord. And I think, and I was thinking about this morning about the mindset. I think, and you may have an opinion on this, maybe you don't, but like, if you're thinking about this and you're not generally really excited about it, like, this is going to be great. Like, I think this is a way to really, create a nest egg for me and gain wealth and all this stuff. If you're not really excited about that idea, then don't do it, because as we know, being a landlord is really tough, and there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of ups and downs with it. We had we've had good years, we've had terrible years, we've had great residents, we've had horrible residents. So if you enter into this, there's no guarantees. So you need to be really excited about it because you're not always going to be. So if you started I don't know, I'm kind of reluctant about doing this, don't do it, I think. Does that, you agree with that, or is that maybe the wrong thought process there?
Yeah, we even coined a term. I mean, it's not like our term necessarily, but reluctant landlords, it's not,
Yeah.
they're just frustrated that they're in this situation. And if you're not in the right mindset and you're not, going into it prepared for the ups and downs, like you mentioned, it becomes a real burden. And we saw it back in 2008. I think that was, for the most
Yeah.
part, that clients, we had, because as you mentioned, it was like our first marketing jingle was, if you can't sell it, let us rent it. And, we had owners that were desperate and that were in dire straits because they were either financially strapped, or they couldn't sell their home and they had to move for other reasons like being transfers or something like that. But it was a struggle, to get their mindset in the right place and to let them know that this is at that time it's probably a temporary stopgap measure until the market rebounded. And we've
Yeah.
worked our way out of all those, for the most part, all those clients. But now it's a different switch. I think one thing that's different in this marketplace is the Airbnb mentality. I mean, it has become a little more acceptable where maybe you let other people into your home. Even
Right.
say, like, I'm going to go away for a month in my personal house. I'll let someone rent it for a month, and then that's
Mhm.
just the one time I do it. I mean, that is a little more acceptable today, or maybe commonplace today. But in general, though, if you make this switch into a long-term rental with us, it's a permanent switch, for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. What personality types do you think struggle most being landlords?
Yeah, I think that I'm not a psychologist, but I play one on TV maybe. But no, I think at the end of the day, perfectionists, I think we struggle with people that are perfectionists because they expect nothing to go wrong. And when it does,
Mhm.
they expect some type of like miracle response, which isn't typical or possible. I also think things that want to control, like, I mean, I wouldn't call them control freaks, but they want a high level of control in their life and they want to direct everything so they can't let go. We struggle with those people as well. And then possibly the do-it-yourselfers because, you know, when you live in a home and you're a weekend warrior and you want to fix something at your own leisure and it takes you 3 weekends to do it, that's fine. But this is a different business, or it's a different, um, beast. It's a business now, and we have timelines, expectations, and things that have to be done in a different way. And most of the time, it involves getting it done quickly and using professionals to make sure it's done right. So,
Yeah. No, I think those are two. I think those are both good ones. Professionalists, control freaks, because there's going to be things happen. Your tenant's not going to treat the property the way you treated it. Just that's the reality of it. Don't expect that. Assuming you take good care of your property, but your residents, this is probably they're thinking of it as a temporary place to live, right? It's not a place that they plan to improve or anything like that. So mindset is so critical there. So next big question to consider is, does it make financial sense to rent my home? All right, so let's say you want to go forward and you're saying, yes, I really want this to be a rental property. I'm excited about the opportunity to make this happen. You got to make sure it pencils out, right?
mhm.
So kind of go through what you think, is involved with getting into the numbers and just saying, does this make sense financially for me to rent?
Yeah, this is very important. I believe a lot of people, even seasoned investors, underestimate the financial side of this business. So really, yeah, it starts with understanding the financial performance. And I think it comes down to basically three main areas, just understanding your cost. So it's your taxes, your insurance, your mortgage rates, et cetera. But also, putting together a budget for repairs, CapEx expenditures, that's capital improvement expenditures. Then knowing the market rates, so you can start with that top number, what
Yeah.
you expect to bring in. Once you have all those costs and revenue laid out, you can put together a pro forma or kind of like a P&L that kind of shows you what on paper you could make, and that will help you make that financial decision. Outside of the financial part, there's also, setting up cash reserves and then setting up the business entity. I mean, you have to have that dream team. We have a blog out there that helps you put together that dream team. I mean, let alone the legal structure of getting like maybe an LLC or LLP or something like that. Check your insurance coverages as well, because you probably have to make some adjustments to your
Yeah.
personal residence insurance coverage. And then understanding the legal and obligations and limitations. For example, if your neighborhood has a cap on rentals, or if your town has a cap on rentals, or there's some other type of structure in place that limits your ability. But us, if you're going to self-manage, you just need to understand the general legal environment of owning a rental business. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, when I was our BDM back in 2008, until we hired Jake several years later, but I would take calls back with this. This was the frustrated, the reluctant landlord. And they're like, well, my mortgage is 2,400. I have to hit that. And I wasn't this blunt with it, but I'm like, the market doesn't really care what your mortgage is. It doesn't. So if you're like, well, I'll do this, but I have to get X, you may not. And so I think, for me, it all starts with rent. And yeah, you're right. All the expenses that have to be there. And I think, like you mentioned, people underestimate a lot of that. But you really need to get very clear on rent. And yeah, you can use Zillow, you can use some online tools, but I've said this before. I think the first call should be to a property manager, honestly. A property manager that has a big footprint. Maybe you've seen their signs or seen homes for rent in your neighborhood you're thinking of. Talk to those people, because they will give you honest evaluations of rent. Not like, hopefully not pie in the sky numbers, but real rents, things that are transacting in your neighborhood in real time. Because if you don't get that right, everything else falls apart. And so I do think getting into that property manager and understanding your rent, and then like you mentioned, really fleshing out the P&L, the pro forma, and setting the correct expectations, because it's not just, well, my house is in great shape. I've lived here for many years and never had really any problems, so I don't really expect much maintenance. You're going to have maintenance. It's just a reality of owning it. So while your furnace performed perfectly for you, maybe it may not with your resident or your AC or appliances. Any number of things can go wrong. So it's really clear. It's really important to get clear on all that. And there's a lot of tools out there to help, but I always say be conservative on vacancy, be conservative on repairs and maintenance, because they will bite you. They always do, it seems like. So let's move on. Well, the next question is, will my home make a good rental property? That's another good question to ask, because you may want to rent it. It may make financial sense for you to rent it, but you may not have the product may work great for you, but not all homes make great rental property. So what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a wide variety of inventory out there. I mean, we see it in our portfolio ourselves, obviously, but there's definitely a sweet spot in the market, or any market. And I think the overriding characteristic is that it needs to be well maintained and probably like a neutral decor, just so people can see themselves in it. There's nothing off-putting or unique about it. The average, home in our market, for example, 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 to 3 bathrooms do really well. Obviously, being in a good school system also attracts really strong and long-term residents. But there's also, niche markets that do really well too, and small houses that fit into a niche area. There's areas in our city that have, high rental, college age rentals, and, they have a different home than like the suburban family home. So there's all different types that will fit. But at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to well-maintained, well-functioning, and just warm and inviting, neutral environment.
Yeah. And I think the average rent in Indianapolis is $1,400 a month. And, the closer you can be to that, I think the better market, the more market you're going to have. So if you have this extravagant home that's 6 bedrooms, 8 baths, 6,000 square feet, there is a market for that, but it is really, really small. So while you may want to hold on to that, just understand that that's going to be a challenge to rent a home like that. And the turnover, if you have to repaint that thing between residents, that's really expensive. So it could be a stopgap measure. Maybe you need to rent it while you're leaving the country for a year or two or whatever. But that to me is not a great long-term asset to hold as a rental property. It just doesn't make sense. So
Yeah. Circling back to what you said earlier about having the it pencil out. I mean, luckily, I mean, I think the reason why we're even talking about this is because that a lot of people have lower mortgage rates from 5, 10 years
yeah,
ago, or even longer in some cases, that make your mortgage payment and much lower than the market rate on rents in most cases. So, but yeah, once you get into that higher end, it starts that gap narrows quite a bit because there's only a certain amount that people are willing to pay or can afford. If they could afford a large home, they would just buy it, for most
yeah,
cases. So
yeah. You alluded to it earlier, Scott, but what do you think goes into, there's a lot here, but what goes into to prepping a rental property the right way?
yeah, I think that, like you said, I mean, your furnace or water heater or doorknob worked while you lived there. Maybe it was a little loose or something. A doorknob was loose, but you dealt with it. Well, when a resident moves in, they expect it to work and work as designed. So I think that, the first thing that goes into prepping a home, and we offer this service, is we do an inspection that goes through and checks the home for quality and defects. And then we always recommend handling all minor and deferred maintenance to make sure, again, the home is operating as it should and as it was designed. Another key aspect, as I mentioned earlier too, is just getting it back to a neutral environment. I mean, if you have you'd like a certain color that isn't standard, we may want to consider bringing that back to kind of a even keel so a wider audience will accept it. And then, the final thing that we always do, and we recommend this to all our clients, is just getting all personal effects out of the home and de-identifying it as, anything to do with you. I mean, don't leave your grill, don't leave your sofa, et cetera, et cetera. We want to have it just an empty slate, for someone else to move in.
Yeah. No, it's true. People are like, well, and we've dealt with this. It's like, well, I'm going to leave, let's say a washer dryer, but if it doesn't work, it's not on me, the resident. That's not going to work very well. Residents want, like you said, if they walk into a home during a showing and they see a washer dryer there, they expect that washer dryer to be there and work. And if it doesn't work, then the landlord takes care of it. So yes, cosmetically, I think bringing it back to neutral, doing all this stuff. I don't think there's wrong with a little color, but I think people understand that some colors just don't go well with a bigger audience. So, but also health and safety. I think most people, I would guess, don't understand fully what it means to make a home super safe and mitigate risk as much as possible. A classic example we've been dealing with a lot are handrails. And if you have a home that was built, a newer build, then you're likely going to be up to code and handrails are fine. But, Indianapolis has a lot of old housing stock and we manage a lot of that stuff. And handrails, like my home, T&H would not lease my home right now because I know I have some handrail issues that would have to be addressed. It's been that way. My house is 140 years old. It's going to been that way for a very long time. But in today's environment, you have to make your home super safe, and you want to make it safe. That should be something that landlords are like, yeah, that's my first priority. I want to make sure it's very safe. Not only because we hope you're a good human doing this, but secondly, you don't want to take on that burden of someone getting hurt. And that's something I know, Scott, you pay a lot of attention to, talking to our field people about making sure that home is super safe because it's really important.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the things that we offer when we do our evaluation is that we check for all the health and safety factors that we've learned over the years, and that we follow all the guidelines as far as the city, state, and federal guidelines. And you're right, a lot of things are grandfathered in technically, but when you make it a rental, it puts it into a different category, and you have to make sure that liability is mitigated, like you said, and that you don't have anyone injured, not just from a lawsuit standpoint, just from like I said, a human standpoint. You don't want a kid falling down, breaking their knee, or an older person slipping or falling. So it's just something that, we want to avoid at all costs. And we have like a hard line there that we don't
Right.
cross. And luckily, we have some really good field people that help enforce that. And sometimes that surprises owners, but it's something that, again, it's a business now, and you have to put it into a different category and address those issues.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about this, but what expenses do you think homeowners routinely underestimate, especially new investors or seasoned investors that maybe have had a good run of luck and haven't had a lot of issues? Like, where do you see this, the commonality with disappointment, I guess?
Yeah, I think the two main pain points we see every day are vacancy and maintenance cost. And it really comes down to, we do have a seasonality in our market, especially. So this time of year, everything is, creeping at a slow pace. But, the good news is things do rent all year round. It's just there are periods that's slower and then periods that maybe it's normal. And then there's periods that's heated and things go really quickly. It's hard to time that perfectly. And it's just like buying a stock in the stock market. You can't always guess. But here it's not too hard to figure out, and the winter is the slowest for us. But overall, really since COVID period, labor and material costs have really escalated. So that's a challenge. We deal with that every day. We fight hard. Sometimes it feels like it's a losing battle, but we are always out looking for, reasonable cost solutions that are high cost as well, or high quality. And, it's one of those things where we have to worry about speed, we have to worry about quality, and cost is part of it, but you can't have all three. You can't have low
Yeah.
cost, high quality, and very quick. You have to pick only two of those. And we definitely err on, the quality and speed because it's a business
Yeah.
and we have to get things done
Yeah.
well. So.
No doubt. Are there, during your, all these years of doing this, what do you think? I think it's an interesting question. Like, what condition issues do you think become bigger problems when tenants live there versus owners? I think this provides insight into that expectation about. So, what do you see? Like, do you see any commonality there with things that owners may not have experienced, but residents certainly do?
Yeah, I'm living it myself. I have a furnace that's 20 plus years old. I'm keep on hoping that it lasts another season, but if it fails, it's on me. I have to deal with that. So yeah, aging equipment is probably the biggest challenge I see. If you live in a home, you can deal with that at your own pace, and you can get multiple bids. You can take the time to find the perfect solution. But when a piece of equipment goes down in a rental business, it's a time pressure situation. You have statutory guidelines that control and help guide us there, that you have to get things done very quickly because all homes have to have a heat source and have it functioning all times. You have to have water at all times, etc. So anytime a piece of equipment goes down, even something like a refrigerator, really puts a high frustration factor into the residents, and they don't like losing $200-300 worth of food. So I guess at the end of the day, if you can prepare your home knowing that you have good, reliable equipment, and if you're on the borderline of something being, aged out or starting to be at the end of its lifetime, it probably makes sense to go ahead and prepare and replace that. So then you don't have to worry about it for the next 10 plus years in most cases. Get that over with and make sure it's going to be there, reliable for the resident. So that's probably the biggest problem I see is that, just not dealing with the adversity of a piece of downed equipment.
Yeah. And really just little nuisances that as homeowners we probably deal with. Like, there's probably a bunch in my house I could name, but like my garage door right now, that service door, just sticks, doesn't open very well. It's a pain in the butt. But my wife and I are just kind of used to it. It's just like, well, we'll get around to doing that one day. And ultimately we're going to have to, and if we rented it just like it is, then I'm sure that would be one of the initial calls. Garage door doesn't function very well. Can you come out here and adjust it? And that's just, it's just one of those things. Like if you have a nuisance thing in your house, I think you got to be very clear and think about that. Like what am I kind of manipulating to make work? Because your resident's not going to put up with that probably. They're not going to like, well, you got to, turn it this way and move it that way and it'll work. No, they're going to want things like you mentioned to work as designed. So it's important, I think, just to take care of those and to just eliminate that right off the bat. So
Yeah, we all seen the data. There's a lot of great data in our industry about maintenance and how that's directly linked to tenant satisfaction and their
yeah,
renewal rate, for example. So it could be a death by a thousand cuts. If you have a lot of little nicky picky things that, like you mentioned, are you just deal with, but a resident gets tired of, they'll find a different property that doesn't have that. But if a major thing goes out, you have kind of like one chance to get that right. If
Right.
multiple major things go out, that tenant's going to be gone. They don't want to deal with a
Probably
house
so.
that's falling
Yeah.
apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Tim was on our podcast, our renewal manager, and was just said it so well. He's like, if residents feel like they're being taken care of and they know that they can feel that, then they're probably going to renew. If everything's else is the same, they don't have to move or they're moving jobs or whatever. If they just have to suffer through a bunch of, maybe suffer is the wrong word, but they have to deal with a bunch of small little things, they'll find a different house probably. So I think the renewal piece is, like you brought up, is really important too. So question, what's the first maintenance call usually about? So you rent this property, and what should do we have commonality here of like what's a normal maintenance call look like, first call look like?
I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know if we have data that actually supports this, but it seems like there's always a plumbing problem. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know I've experienced it buying a house, and I've seen, plenty of work orders when residents move in that something goes wrong with the plumbing. There's a leak or a clogged toilet or something to that effect. Yeah, I think it just goes down to the fact that there's usually a vacancy period where someone doesn't use a home, and then once everyone starts using things, kicking the tires, little minor things like that start, exposing themselves, and then they put in a request. So yeah, that's kind of the first surprise, I think, is that you're probably gonna have a plumbing call really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a drain that's slow or a faucet that drips or whatever. I think you're right. I mean, plumbing has got to be one of the top, obviously, maintenance issues we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that makes sense. So, final question, Scott. What are the main reasons in your mind, I guess we wrap this all up, that someone should make their personal residence a rental property, and what are the reasons they maybe shouldn't? Just curious your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you said it really well. The very first thing you said was you should have an interest in this. I mean, it should be something that excites you, at least with the possibilities of success. I mean, obviously, I think for us, I mean, we see it every day, and we also live it where we have our own rental properties, is that it's a very good, it can be a very good investment strategy. But I think it's something that you have to be aware of. And I think we're in a unique position in the market right now with some people have locked in low cost of capital, and it gives them the opportunity to have different margins than maybe a new purchase today would have. So it's something that you should, look into or can look into. But overall, yeah, you want to make sure it's a part of a well-balanced investment strategy, not put all your eggs in one basket, and then be able to make that mind switch, like I said earlier, that it becomes a business. So you got to handle all the situations that are going to come your way. We've heard this before many times that it's not real estate investing is not a get rich quick scheme. It's a get rich slow scheme.
That's right.
So I think it's something that can be very beneficial in the long run, but you just have to be prepared and set up well to handle the adversity that comes as part of it. In the meantime, the property's appreciating and you're gaining all that wealth. People who probably shouldn't consider this is that if you can't make that mental flip, this isn't probably right for you. If you don't have the fortitude for adversity, you have difficulty dealing with adversity, or you're emotionally struggle with tough issues, you probably should avoid this. And if you're not financially prepared either, I mean, there's a certain cost of this business as well that you have to be prepared for. Sometimes the cash flow works, but you can't count on it at all. So you need to have, resources in case something goes wrong where you need to put a large expenditure down to repair an issue. Because some of the wealth is locked in and you can't get access to it right away. So
Right.
you have to realize that you can't just take the cash you receive each month to pay the expenses.
Yeah. I think all that's right. For me, it's about, if I'm advising someone doing this, is like not to set like incredibly low expectations, or worst case scenarios, but don't expect any cash flow from this venture. That's what that to me, if you're okay with not having any cash flow, I think it's a great opportunity to build wealth, like you mentioned, slowly though. It won't be without drama. It's not like putting it in the stock market and just letting it go. it's a business and it's going to require your attention, whether you choose to self-manage or hire a property manager. There's going to be things you have to deal with on a, not every day, but certainly during turnovers and vacancy and things like that, or big maintenance issues. But if you're saying like, I ran my numbers and I should be able to get $300 a month, so that's $3,600 a year, we can use that to fund our vacation. You're probably not going to go anywhere, right? I mean, that's not going to work out. It may work out in a given year, but generally speaking, cash flow is not nearly what people think it is, even with a conservative pro forma, because when a furnace goes out or a roof needs replaced or whatever, that cash flow is gone for maybe multiple years. So again, we've done it. We went into it, I think, with a mindset of not a personal residence, but investing with a mindset that this would not, at least a few months into it, we realized this is not going to pay our bills for like our normal living expenses. Let's hope it pays our mortgage and maintenance and we'll be okay with that. And that's kind of how it's turned out all these years later. And I think if you're okay with that and you have a bigger picture in mind, then I think it's a great way to do it. But if you're a control freak, like you mentioned, if you can't deal with tough things, because there are tough things in this business, and you don't want to be distracted by it, then I would just go ahead and sell that residence. Don't make it a rental property. So
yeah, as you take the proceeds and put it in something that's less stressful, that may be the case. But again, there is a power of leverage that this provides that, and other investments don't. But at the end of the day, yeah, you need to be able to handle those adverse issues that come up. As you mentioned, we designed our business, and maybe it's not perfect and maybe it's not the only thought out there, but we decided that it would be a cash flow neutral business. I mean, we would use the cash flow to support the business, keep it in the business, and build up reserves for those periods. We wouldn't take the money out each month to divert it to other needs, because you just can't count on it, like you mentioned.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, it's been great, Scott. I appreciate you coming on doing this.
yeah, thanks. I think it's been a life changer for my family investing in real estate. So I think it's something that should be looked at, but just be careful.
Yeah. We hope everyone has picked up some information that will help them in their investing. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, and please stay invested in your investment.